I'm fucked up and you're not wrong. I'm in my feelings, I don't feel it, you don't know what I'm on. I'm in my feelings, I want to feel them, some of them way too strong. I'm in my feelings, I want to feel them, all of my feelings gone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Circle Club. That was our boy Jay Roddy. None of my feelings was good, Corey. Welcome back. What's up?
What's going on, my man? Always happy to be here. Always happy.
Absolutely. First off, check us out on Spotify. We are on Spotify every Thursday, every Friday. Tune in, tap in. Corey. Wow. Episode 3. We get Victor Timely. Not gonna lie to you though. At first, I was a little hesitant. I felt like, remember last week we were talking about how we're like, it's so quick, things are happening real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I was okay last week, but I don't want this to be a trend every week. And I kind of felt in the beginning it was moving in some parts a little too quick for me. One thing that annoyed me a little bit was when Sylvie popped in. I felt like all that happened very fast, and I was like, they ended up losing Victor Timely, and I'm like, would they have lost him? Whatever, I'll let it slide because we want the plot to progress. But honestly, after that moment when Miss Minutes decides to turn on Renslayer, it just was like, oh yeah, we got right into it, the meat that you love. But even throughout the entire story, I was happy with it overall. I thought it was still a good episode as usual. They had a nice balance. What did you think?
Yeah, I was kind of feeling that way. I wasn't like bored at all, but there was definitely some of those convenient moments, like especially with Victor Timely slipping away was the specific spot that stood out to me. I was like kind of okay with it because if you're trying to get a little bit more context in the episode, like they ended up doing, I think it worked out, right? Because there was just a little bit more that it needed to flesh out. Whereas in the moment, if that was just him actually getting off and that was like the end of this episode and he did get away, it would have seemed a little corny to me. Like I was getting very hard Disney vibes from that. Like,
definitely.
That was way too easy, right? So I like how things progressed and transpired throughout the rest of the episode. And ultimately some of like the twists that were going on, right? Like I think the whole him feeling Ravona at first was something that we expected, but how he just dumped her was something I didn't expect. But then the whole Miss Minutes situation going on there was another thing I absolutely did not expect. And when he kind of stuffed her away, it was the perfect reaction to me. It'd be like, yo, whoa, what did I just let loose here?
Man, I was watching that scene and like, you ever seen that meme that's like, bonk, go to horny jail? That's what I was thinking of Miss Minutes. I was like, Miss Minutes, you got to chill for a second there. But it makes sense. It was kind of like, these it's her love. He created her, right? So it makes sense that she would be in love and super attached in this certain way.
100%.
And she wasn't getting that from the attention, which kind of brings us to the end of the episode here with Miss Minutes basically saying at the end, she goes, I know something that will really make you angry about He Who Remains. So what do you think Miss Minutes knows about the relationship between Renslayer and He Who Names that would make her angry?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent, or I keep stipulating that we might be within the loop already, right? So I think a part of this entire loop, no matter what, was the whole situationship. We'll lean on with the whole Will and Jada situationship going on again in the news here. Yeah. The whole Ravona and He Who Remains situationship was clearly a thing here. They're going to flesh that story out a little bit more. But I think what it ultimately reflects, given some of the things that they showed in this episode with Victor specifically pulling back off of partnerships, right? And him never, let's just hypothetically say, feeling out the whole Miss Minutes and putting her into like a vision body, so to speak, since we've gone down that road with Wanda and Vision at the end of the day, technically. So Kang or He Who Remains or the person at the end of time, no matter what they are, has a problem with partnership. He wants to be on top. So I think what may have transpired is he needed partnerships to get to that top, showing the corruption, and Ravona was one of those individuals. And I'm going to assume that because there was that situationship or love there, and they rose to the top. What he did was basically wipe Ravona's mind and keep her within the TVA, so he had full control and ownership over what her destiny was, but really didn't allow her that free will to be with him by his side at the end of time. And I think that for Miss Minutes is the dark secret she's hiding here, because that's the only thing that would make sense to me with the whole Miss Minutes and like Ravona feud. I could see Miss Minutes being totally okay with him tossing Ravona in that situation, and why she didn't want to help Ravona also in the end of last season when she was trying to find He Who Remains. It wasn't until He Who Remains was okay with getting Ravona involved as that repercussion for Miss Minutes now giving her the files. And it wasn't even the files she wanted. It was somewhere that she wanted to go. And I think that's evidence of everything that I just kind of pointed out.
I love that theory. I think that's a great theory. I think that's spot on. I think it's going to hit. Make sure you guys subscribe so you can see when that does hit, because we know that Mr. Marvel over here will let us know that he predicted it.
Yeah. If that one hits, you know I'm talking about that one. I'm asking for my banners. We're from Boston. Better hang them.
Exactly. But no, yeah, I think that makes total sense, because she was sort of scorned lover, and also throughout the entire process, when they even go back in time to give young Victor that message from himself from the future, Miss Minutes is like, well, this is what He Who Remains left. This is his path. This is what he wanted. So Miss Minutes is working on He Who Remains' behalf, right? Miss Minutes is not working on her own agenda, not working with what Renslayer wants. Miss Minutes is an extension of He Who Remains. I believe that maybe flips when He Who Remains, or I guess Victor Timely, it's going to get all confusing here. When Victor Timely ultimately rejects her for Renslayer, she's like, you know what? I've seen this one too many times, and now it's time I take the ropes. But I love your theory that he can't do this on his own. He has to have other people help him out. But ultimately, his ego or narcissism is what makes him kind of decide in the end of the day, I'm going to wipe their minds so that way I get the credit. I get the statues. I get the praise. Because what did we see in this episode that was very evident and telling of who his base or character is? He's a con artist, right? He's a con man. And I think that also makes a lot of sense, not to get too ahead of ourselves, why he may have beef with the Fantastic Four, who actually produce science and technology. Who knows? Who knows?
I like that. I like that theory a lot. But I think it plays to the point where it's like, if we're going off the fact that it's He Who Remains path, right? He Who Remains, and we've been talking about it in our last few sessions here. Was he the good version? That's what Loki thinks, right? And I think some of these actions are starting to reflect that maybe he isn't that ultimate good one. He might not be fully bad, but clearly if he's willing to choose this individual that is willing to con people a bit, right? I think it's a little telling to who he wants to kind of fill that mantle or bring him back, so to speak.
Now, what's important to remember about that too is we don't actually know if that was He Who Remains' request. Based on what we saw with Loki and Sylvie, it sounded like he gave them the keys. Now, it's hard to trust a villain or who we're told is a villain, right? Maybe Miss Minutes is the ultimate villain here. Miss Minutes is the one trying to get that power and pull the strings, right? Miss Minutes wants to be that lover, to fall in love. That way it's like, I don't want to say manipulates, but also manipulates, right? So like if Victor Timely is in love, he's more likely to be manipulated. And ultimately Miss Minutes can pull the strings. So we actually don't know if that was his final request. But I think to your point, if that was his final request where he selected this version of himself, maybe he thinks it's the best version of himself. Maybe, I think ultimately we'll find out about Victor Timely's motives and who Victor Timely truly is. But ultimately, Kang knows. And that'll tell us, He Who Remains knows. So that'll tell us basically if He Who Remains is a good guy or a bad guy. Right now, it sounds like you're leaning more that he was a bad guy.
Yeah, I think he's like still right in that middle a little bit, right? Like I think he's on plan B, right? Like I'm going off the logic and I'm taking it for what we've been told on screen, right? And I'm going to take Miss Minutes for the truth in what she said, right? And she is taking on what He Who Remains wants them to do, and He Who Remains path. And He Who Remains, I can only imagine, right? If he felt like after all this time that it had to be these two Lokis, and that's it. That's the only people who can take this up, who can keep this train on the tracks, and can make sure that billions, trillions of individuals don't die, right? They decide no, right? They kill him. He needs to have a backup plan because he's apparently the one of one Kang who was able to kind of thread that line of not being too bad, probably not being too good, where he was wanting to give free will. He kind of just teetered that perfect spot where it was possible to execute the plan, right? And when all that time to just throw all your eggs into a basket with two Lokis just doesn't feel like something somebody would do, right?
Because so He Who Remains knows.
Yeah, he had to, like he's probably for the first time going out on some hope with the fact that, like, hey, based on everything I know, these are the people. But if they act in their typical self-interest, they're gonna kill me, and that leaves like the impossible to know what's gonna happen, right? So how can I control this a little bit? Here's my plan to get me basically back in seat, and I'm basically refreshed again for eons because I've not been in this process like I have been now, right? So I think it's his way of being able to kind of reset the button, like the Matrix effect, like we've been talking about. Like we're on the sixth reset, really. We're on our sixth point. So really hoping that it's that seventh day, that Lord's Day, that we finally hit the button and we're good. But I think that's his plan B, man. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to have that, given the type of character he was.
I think that makes sense that would be his plan B, that he wouldn't fully trust Loki or Sylvie to make the right decision. Because ultimately, again, if he's an egomaniac narcissist, he may not want the responsibility to run the TVA or the end time, but he knows ultimately he knows what's best, or that's what he thinks, right? So I think that makes sense.
Sometimes you just want the refresh button, right? Like if he knows the right path to get himself back in charge, right? Like what does it really matter to him at the end of the day?
Right? Exactly. Now, at the end of this episode, we get into a tiff here with Renslayer versus Sylvie versus Loki and Mobius, and then Victor Timely sitting there. But ultimately, Sylvie lets them go. Sylvie trusts Loki. Again, I haven't been super impressed so far with what we've seen with Sylvie this season. I feel like maybe if we saw a little bit more the previous episode or this episode, a little bit more trust from her to kind of be like, okay, or maybe like, oh, I love Loki so much that like it burns me that I'm going to make this mistake, or some sort of parallel potentially of like, okay, Miss Minutes is like Sylvie and Loki is like Victor, like some sort of parallel or something. I think it would have just worked a little bit more clean. It felt like it didn't make sense that Sylvie, who was so scorched earth, so upset, so angry, would let Victor Timely go. But I digress. Now that Victor Timely is now with Loki and Mobius, and we have this new trio, how do you think those three are going to sort of work together going forward, or not work together?
Yeah, I think it's intriguing to see. I think the real outside factor here is I really don't believe it's going to be just a trio, if I'm being honest. I think OB is an incredible factor here, just due to the fact that Victor himself is going to be extremely, extremely in awe and inspired the day, which is probably next week, on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, when he walks through the TVA and sees Ouroboros, right? Because if you remember his comments here, like he looks up to Ouroboros. Like he always had dreamed like a lot of these things were of his invention and things like that. But this handbook, everything that like has guided him in life, has helped him go back down this path, is really because of Ouroboros, right? So I think Ouroboros is key to help sway Victor onto a good or bad path. And that's the cool thing about this, right? And that in the variants, and I think why Sylvie lets him go, right? Like she really is a hypocrite if she does kill him, right? Because again,
Right.
everything he stands for is what he's sitting there saying, like, I'm not this person, you know. I don't even know these things. Like, yeah, like there's
right.
I look like this person, but like I make my own
That
choices.
wasn't me.
Yeah,
right.
like she has to allow him that opportunity, right? And like again,
Right.
who knows? Maybe everybody is kind of like a Loki, and it is the same story, and that free choice is there, but like you still end up finding those same paths, right? So maybe Victor does find that path, but I think Obi is really the X factor here to decide. I think where Victor really ends on the
morally.
scale.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean that's a great point about Sylvia as well. I thought about that in the moment. I was like, okay, yeah, well, if you're about free will, then you can't be kind of out here killing people, because then you're sort of saying I'm the final decider or naysayer per se. I feel like, go ahead.
Saying to that, like she leaves herself an impossible task if she does commit to that, right? Because now you have to kill unlimited Kangs. You're never going to be able to truly accomplish that. Like you really won't, right? So
because Kang will just keep coming back. Exactly.
There'll always be another
it's
version.
almost like she has to have hope, whether she wants to or not, that Victor Timely will be timely and work out. But you know what I mean? Like it just has to kind of work that way. So I agree. I think that makes sense. I think that I could see the trio working together. I could see Victor Timely ultimately being a character that starts out good, starts out on the side of the team, but then ultimately just inherently can't control. If you remember, right? And the big thing about season 1 that was revealed about Loki was like Loki always, like Loki's never the hero, right? Loki always turns out to be the bad guy. Loki always turns when Loki tries to do good, someone dies. I think our version of Loki is proving that to not be true. But I think with He Who Remains, with Kang, all these variants, we may see that ultimately at the end of the day, it's not Loki that is always going to turn out bad. It's Kang. And if you think about it, when Mobius said that, when the TVA said that, they were still under He Who Remains control. So basically, they're saying this about Loki because it was told to them about Loki. It may not be true. It may actually be true about He Who Remains. That's one of my big theories.
And this is where I think your theory and my theory do converge, because I think ultimately when you think about Victor Timely, like and even the actions he's had, right? Like he's in his own self-interest. He himself wants to see nothing more than his inventions and these ideas, and him to be the one that invented this whole thing on the TVA, right? Yes. So when you think about OB and who OB is to the TVA right now, he is probably that most constant other than Miss Minutes, right? Miss Minutes is clearly not on that side. So OB might enlighten Victor, but he also might set him down that dark path due to one specific reason. Victor finally having access to the type of technology he's never had, and OB being one that can give him all of that.
He did mention that this episode too. He did say that.
I can see, and like to your point of like the all Kangs could be bad, and He Who Remains kind of alluding to really there's good and bad ones, right? They all could be bad because they all might have that self-interest that they are the smartest. They are the one who should run these things. And when it comes to a lot of their logics and things that they're probably trying to do, it revolves around this time control. And for you to control time, you have to control all those variants of yourself, right? So inherently, I think it intrinsically makes them all bad because they're all trying to go up against each other and get this same end goal to be the time.
I couldn't agree more. I read somewhere one time about villains, heroes, good guys, bad guys, that basically they're the same character, same personality, same power, same egomaniac, whatever, except the morality is where it splits between someone being good and evil. When you think about a president, right? To think that one person, has all the answers for everyone in the entire country, right? That's egomaniac. When you think of Tony Stark, wow, you think that you know what's best for everyone out here, all of the Avengers, egomaniac. When you think about Lex Luthor, some of the like the Joker, Kang, all of these characters, right? They all sort of have this ego, but what separates them is the morality. And at some point, Iron Man stops to go, you know what? I need help, or, this is wrong. And I think with Kang and He Who Remains, what we're going to see is this obsession with pushing further. Like, let's push technology further. And what do we always talk about with Disney? Disney's always talking about social things, relevant things, and the big sort of hot topic right now is AI and technology moving too quickly. Are we safe? Are we protected? So I think that a lot of these themes, this symbolism is going to be sort of coming to fruition over the next sort of Marvel projects.
Yeah, I think you think back to a specific Marvel project that did not land specifically within the MCU, right? It's going to be inaugurated in, it's going to be incorporated in. But Deadpool, when Colossus tells Deadpool, a hero is made in about 5 moments, right? And you can choose those 5 moments, and one of those moments for Victor is coming up here, right?
Yeah.
Is what is he going to do when he's now at the TVA, when he has the ability to have the technology he's always wished he's had in his hands? Is he going to use it for good, or is he going to use it for bad? Going right back to your point, and it's going to take a few moments, but in those moments, the moral decision comes, and we'll see whether they decide to take it for the self or the group. And I agree.
And that's going to be huge. Now, let's talk a little bit about next week, episode 4. What do we think we're going to see next week? Like, do you have any major predictions or anything that you can see coming up?
Listen, I texted you before this episode. I said, hey, listen, I want to see one thing. I want to see one thing specific. I want to see Victor Timely, and I want to see a Kang variant. Something of the sort. Sure, I just want to see something. Bring Kang in, get him involved a little bit earlier, get us excited. They gave
right here.
Right here.
I'm hoping to see Victor Timely in this episode or a Kang variant. I mean, it's the man's not. This man is on point.
On my mother, and I only say this when I'm 100% truthworthy. I didn't watch no trailer for the pre-episode. I set it off just my own feelings, and they gave me what I wanted. So I'm gonna shoot big here because I'm hot. All right, I'm hot.
Yeah.
Next episode, I'm looking for Victor Timely to do exactly what we just talked about. I'm looking for Victor Timely to seize his opportunity with the technology in hand, and he might start the episode helping out with a little bit of problem, but he's going to get his hands on something, and Victor Timely is going to be beginning that train down the bad path, down the dark road. He's gonna flip to the Sith side and want that unlimited power. And we're seeing it quick because honestly, from what I'm telling out of this show, they're really not trying to like waste time. They're really trying to get after it. I think they know that they have no more Loki seasons before Secret Wars hits. So this is their last real big opportunity to get a Kang across, especially after the misfire I think that they had with Quantumania Kang with the general audience. This is their opportunity to really seize the moment, get Jonathan Majors out there, because we're probably not going to see him at all until, my guess, Fantastic Four. I really do not think we're going to see him other than that. Maybe we get a taste in Deadpool 3 just because they were shooting and they can get it incorporated. But other than Deadpool 3, which is like really right around the corner, you're really not going to see it until Fantastic Four. And you're going to, I think, get that quick glimpse in Fantastic Four at the severity of Kang, because it's all getting it's like getting started right when it's like Infinity War. We're getting cooking right off the bat.
I hope
Kang is here.
I hope that we get Kang just a sprinkle throughout every project going forward, even if it's just like, you remember Thanos, right? Thanos used to get those little end credits, there'd be like little sprinkles throughout it. I just need that. I don't need everything, but I just need, like, because at this point, I think everything's starting to come together. If you've been on the ride for the whole time, now you're going to start seeing these things come together. I don't think in the Marvels we're going to get something. I think that's more secret invasion related, but you never know. But I think you're right. I think Fantastic Four is probably, or maybe even Deadpool is the next time we'll get something like that. But yeah, and this is really, in my opinion, this is Kang's coming out party.
Yeah.
So I think next episode, you got 3 more episodes, 4, 5, 6. This next episode, we're gonna see maybe the mad scientist king. I think that's kind of what we're due for.
I was gonna say, I love where you're going with this, because I think to really represent who Kang is and really to make the Kang dynasty what it could be, you need to get a couple variants out there that you got a little bit of time with. You don't need a lot of time, like you said, just a little bit of time. Like we got Victor Timely. I would honestly expect we should get another version, unless Victor Timely is truly like the destined He Who Remains. You're obviously going to spend a little bit more time with an individual who has a supposed destiny like he does, but to really build things up, it's not a singular Thanos, right? I think we want that singular big Kang who's still, I think, the Quantumania Kang, who will get a level up from whatever his situation is right now. But you need some of those other Kangs in there, because ultimately I think you need one good Kang. I think you need that good Kang that represents like potentially Iron Lad or whoever it might be. You can do whoever you want with it. Truly, it doesn't need to be an Iron Lad to me, right? But I think you need a good version of Kang, because the possibilities of being able to have that good Kang on your side throughout Kang Dynasty to build things up and potentially have your big bad Kang kill to really set it off as like, okay, the bad guy really won here, and now we need the Avengers and the OGs to do it, right? I think it hits home a little bit more, and it'll hit home.
Oh yeah,
if you've built in these other versions and spent a little bit more time with them. And Victor Timely, as of right now, is the only alive version other than that bad version from Quantumania that we have, and that's it.
I mean, I think the one from Quantumania may have 1, 2 at the end there. Like that's something we always talk about. Because Scott goes, we did win, right? And I think that's going to be such a great twist, man. Like, again, people are sleeping. People don't have faith. Feige's always been right. And, you know, I just think that it's all going to come together. One thing that you mentioned that I love, too, is, like, we talked about last week, Loki and Sylvie. Ultimately, you're going to have this good guys versus bad guys thing. Sylvie may be the bad guys on the bad guys side, so then they have their version of Loki. You know, I think that's exactly right. We're going to need our version of a Kang. So why not Victor Timely if this all works out? I think the thing, too, is if Victor Timely becomes this lovable character like a Mobius type, and we get to that sort of finale or build up, like you said, and he's like, I couldn't stop me or something, and he just they kill him. Like that's going to be a very powerful moment too, and maybe that's what rallies the people. Maybe it rallies the Avengers. You know, it's something. You know, but I think we have to fall in love with a version of him, because that also makes it complex. Because ultimately, the moral dilemma that we are in is a complex decision of free will versus not. You know, when we talk about this in real life, I'm someone who doesn't fully believe in free will. I think things are just, they are what they are, and we're just going down the timeline, and that's okay, because we're in the moment, we're experiencing that free will. But other people adamantly believe that no, there is no timeline, there is no, we're going down the path. Everything I've done is my decision, and that's something. It's a philosophical sort of thing, right? Where there's no right or wrong answer. And that's what's so fascinating. Because
it's like the whole destiny conversation, right? Like by inherently believing in destiny, you inherently believe your story's already written.
Correct. Right? And if you think about it, right, even if you decide to allow everyone to have free will, that was a decision you made. Right, so that wasn't really free will.
Honestly, it just literally like epiphany in my head, right? Like just saying the word destiny, but like, what does destiny just remind you of? Bringing it back to the conversation we're actually having here.
What is that?
Glorious purpose. Glorious purpose to me is just another version of saying destiny. My destiny is this glorious purpose, right? So like it inherently is like a double entendre to this whole conversation we're having about Loki. Loki is literally that person who all his life said glorious purpose, which inherently means he believed in his destiny was for him to have this higher power. Now, how does that play out by like right now trying to fight for free will? But even if he takes, let's say, that throne at the end of time, and he does what He Who Remains wants him to do. Doesn't that inherently make it destiny or that glorious purpose?
Yeah.
So is this all written or is it not, Kang or He Who Remains? I want to know. I need that answer checked off before we move into the whole mutant phase at the end of Secret Wars. We need a concrete answer. This can't be Inception. Oh, here, Kevin Feige. You can't twist the little dreidel and let it just spin and then hit the credits. I want a concrete answer. Is it a timeline or do we have free will after this Secret Wars?
No, I think we'll get those answers for sure. I genuinely think Loki is going to be one of the main leaders. Tom Hiddleston is just a powerful actor. He's great. He's one of those consistent from like the OGs. Now, do you have anything other to add to this episode before we kind of get into my final question for you here?
No, I think the biggest things for me is just the ultimate twist with Renslayer, Miss Minutes, and then like we'll say Victor Timely for right now. I thought that was gonna really, like you said, be like a more trio versus trio battle afterwards, where it was like OB, Loki, Mobius, but to see the twist of them just not making it so easily flow into it, and they all kind of haven't built that trust with one another, and Miss Minutes kind of killed that trust with Victor Timely already. It's an interesting dynamic. A lot of the players that we kind of have going on, right? And I know you mentioned before that like you were expecting something more simple. I like this complexity, right? But it's interesting to see how they'll play it off because they don't have like 6 seasons to go run it off, right? Like as I mentioned,
absolutely,
you have these movies coming up, so you gotta like land it, and they're doing a lot right now, real early, and we don't have technically a lot more time left to flesh out.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, man, I did think this was still a pretty solid episode. I thought it was still strong. I liked it a lot. What would you say your rating was for this episode?
You know, I'm going to have to give it, I think last week I gave it a 7.8. I think I started off week 1 like an 8.2 if my memory's right. I can remember my ratings for the Circle Club. I can't remember what I ate yesterday. Today, I got to feel like it was honestly something more of a surprise for me. So I got to go with like a solid 8.15. I can't go better than the opening episode. But it was right there for me with the twists and it had its low points. If I think it didn't have like those low points or convenient points we talked about earlier,
sure,
it would have had a better score. But overall, still like a great episode in my opinion. Yeah,
I mean, for me, I was a 3.9 out of 5. So you do the conversion yourself. About a 7.8, right? 7.9 ish, high. I would say low 8, high 7 for me. Again, I thought there was a lot of things that they did well. Some of those slower moments, those lower moments, and also there was some wacky music that I wasn't loving. But ultimately, I still thought it was a great episode. We progressed the plot. We learned a lot more about the world. Now we have something to work on. But ultimately, this is still a strong series so far. I'm loving it. Even just the attention to the details, the world that they build, the costumes. I was happy with that. Now, my final question for you. So, a year ago, around this time, we talked about who we think is going to lead the next Avengers. We talked about how we think maybe Strange. We're like, Strange makes sense. He was the same age as Robert Downey Jr., and he's kind of had his touchings a lot throughout this sort of next phase. We got some Wong and some of these other. So it seems like we're kind of setting up for Doctor Strange to be that main guy. Yeah. Feige, now, I don't know if you saw this quote, but Feige had mentioned that Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Spider-Man were supposed to be the leaders. Obviously, we know Chadwick, RIP, that's not happening. Captain Marvel didn't turn out the same way. Not going to happen. We'll see how this next movie turns out. It doesn't look too promising from the trailer, but we'll see. And then Spider-Man, there's an issue with Sony that you're never going to put him as the main guy because Sony just refused to play ball, right? Yeah. So that leaves Doctor Strange and potentially now Loki. We all like Loki. So I was curious, your thoughts on this. So at the end credits, the post credit, at the end of Doctor Strange 2, we get this scene from this episode where we see Victor Timely, we see Loki, we see Mobius. Do you think that somehow, some way, that was intentional from Feige to put that scene there? Do you think it was intentional that maybe somehow Strange is related, going to be involved? or do you think it was just promotion?
I think it was obviously partially a little promotion, right?
Sure.
It's completely different projects, and it had no tie-ins technically to the Doctor Strange movie. It wasn't like it was like an actual post-credit scene for the movie itself, right?
Right.
I think ultimately the importance of putting that in there was to establish, because Doctor Strange movie itself, although it dove into like the incursions and things like that, and they, to us, I know we talked about how it had a lot of the tie-ins and we could see where it made a lot of sense with what we saw in Loki. I think putting the Loki trailer within it was more so that breadcrumb to general audiences that there is a tie-in here. You need to be watching this type of a project. And that was the tell to me, right?
Yeah.
It's like it might have been and like had some promotional roots in it, but it was also to get people to go and watch it so that they, I think, understood more about what is going on and the complexity with the multiverse, right? And that is ultimately where the tie-ins come into me, not more so to bring in Loki to the general team, so to speak, for the Avengers. I don't really see that. As the case, I always still see Loki, even if he's our hero, never really being that hero like Thor is within the Avengers. I see Loki more as that. I see Loki literally more as the guy who finally takes up He Who Remains throne and doing that more than him kind of tag team with Doctor. Like, I cannot see that at all. To me, that would make me feel like Disney's really reaching to just keep the Avengers going at the end of the day.
See, that's interesting you say that, because for me, right, Loki is probably one of those characters in Marvel that's not really at this state true to how the comic is and all that, and I'm okay with it, because sometimes when you make an adaptation, you do it for the betterment of the entire story. I agree. I don't know if I could see him necessarily being with the Avengers. I do like your theory of him sort of being the head of the TVA and sort of being involved with that. But I do think that there is sort of going to be this turning point where it's like the perception, the public perception, the Avengers' perception of who Loki is must change, because it's earned. He deserves it, right? When you think about a lot of characters who've gone through this process, this journey throughout all of the Marvel stories, he has one of the best arcs and growth throughout the entire series. And I feel like he hasn't really gotten that fair shake. And this version of Loki is not the same version that they know either. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that going forward. But I think ultimately Doctor Strange, the reason why that was in there too, like you said, connecting it, that was a taste or tease of possible multiverse. We've seen some with What If. Clearly we get variants with Loki. And I think at some point those two projects, they have to cross paths. They have to cross paths at some point, because they're rooted in time, and Doctor Strange is all about time and seeing different outcomes. And I think somehow, some way, like having Strange kind of almost pop in how Iron Man used to kind of help solve that solution or problem. I mean, I think that would be dope, personally, for me.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a ton of sense, right? The crazy part to me too, like adding to your whole point that you make, is the whole aspect of like the concepts that they have in Doctor Strange as well, with like the Illuminati and like the whole concept of what they're trying to do with the Illuminati to stop incursions, which in theory is trying to stop multiversal wars, right? So if they're trying to stop multiversal wars, and that was the TVA's root justification behind why they're pruning things, where do they intertwine, right? And I think Doctor Strange, especially when he had the time stone, he's supposed to protect that reality. And if somebody's going to come waltzing in to prune a reality, seems like something that you would need to be involved in. So I wouldn't even be surprised going down this road, not them teaming up. Do they end up going head to head? Does the TVA and Loki go head to head with Doctor Strange and a version of the Illuminati within the Secret Wars movie?
That's very fascinating, because if you think about it, that's the one thing we haven't gotten in DC, Marvel, Invincible, The Boys, whatever you want to say. This genre, we have X-Men versus Avengers, X-Men versus the Spider-Man, X-Men or Avengers versus the Illuminati. Like, we haven't really had that.
I want the people to know this is why we do these things live. You are witnessing these ideas and these thoughts literally come live from us. Okay, so when we hit, we hit. We didn't plan this. This is all impromptu light bulbs popping off in our head here. That's how much we want to fit. And this is, I think, bro, I think you just cooked a little, to be honest with you, because if you think about it, like I said, we haven't gotten that, but the whole point of the Civil War sort of battle was that they both wanted a common good, but it was about going about it in different ways. And again, what do we always talk about with Marvel? Timely, what's going on in the world, things like that. And I think a lot of times we think about America, how it's so divided, but we both sort of want what's best or, good. I think it's all about perspective, where you're coming from. So, man, I love that idea. I really do. And I think Loki being at the head of the TVA, it feels like his championship moment to me. So I love that. I think Loki leading the TVA, book it, write it down on this day. It is October 19, 2023. Corey just called it. I think we're going to get a little bit of TVA versus Avengers, Doctor Strange. I love that. I do. Hey, we'll see. Dude, if it happens, Kevin Feige needs to hire me at some point.
Yeah.
I love sales. Sure. I love sales. I'll sell the red carpet for you. It's okay. Give me the black and white suit. I'll even wear the bow tie, whatever you want. You can style me all you want.
I got to cut
Marvel Comics on my suit. I'll do it. It doesn't matter.
I got to cut a reel of your predictions and just mail it to his house. Like, let this man cook. Corey Cooks. Listen, that's what we're going to call you, Corey Cooks.
Hey, I know those writers are looking for some negotiations. You want to know what'll help those negotiations? You got to do like me in the room. Bring a lot of value there. We'll
absolutely, man. I mean, this is someone who you're all in the sauce with this, man. That's why we say you're the Marvel expert, bro. And this is why you cook the way you do. But all right, man, that's gonna do it. Thanks for coming on as always. Like we say, every Thursday, peep us here. We're gonna go live after the shows. If not, we'll let you know it's a Friday. But you can also listen on Spotify, pass along to a friend, etc. Corey, my man, like I said, thank you for coming on as always, my man. And like we always say here, peace out. Just be you. And my man J Rod is gonna take us out later.
It's different now. I need your heart right now, 'cause mine is broken.